Hello and welcome back to the Kendal Mountain YouTube channel. For those of you who don't already know, this month we're going to be continuing our focus on swimming, and this week we're moving over to literature where we have the amazing Bonnie Tsui who's going to be telling us all about her book, Why We Swim. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to Kendal Mountain Literature Festival, proudly presented by Dana and supported by Woolpower and George Fisher. I'm Polly Atkin, and in this event I'm going to be talking to Bonnie Tsui about her book, Why We Swim. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Bonnie, who's dialing in from San Francisco today, and then she's going to read us a little bit about her book so we can get a flavour of it. So Bonnie is a journalist and long-time contributor to the New York Times. She's author of American Chinatown, winner of the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, and a San Francisco Chronicle bestseller. Her new book, Why We Swim, was published by Algonquin Books in April 2020. It was a New York Times Book Reviewer's Editor's Choice, a Boston Globe bestseller, and an LA Times Book Club pick and bestseller. Bonnie will be publishing her first children's book, Sarah and the Big Wave, about big wave women surfers, in 2021. And I hope we'll get to talk about that a little bit towards the end of this session, because I can't wait to hear about that as well. So welcome, Bonnie, virtually to Kendal.
Thank you so much, Polly. I'm so happy to virtually be here. As I was saying before, I wish I was sitting in that little couch opposite you in person, but we'll make do. It's really lovely to have the opportunity to speak to the Kendal Mountain Literature Festival. And I am going to read a bit from the beginning of Why We Swim.
Excellent.
And just to give everyone a sense of what the book is about. And the book is divided into 5 thematic sections: survival, well-being, community, competition, and flow. And this chapter is from the survival section of the book, and it's called Stone Age Swimming. The abalone does not want to come off the rock. 15 feet underwater, I jabbed the metal abalone iron underneath the shell, between the mollusk's muscular foot and the boulder it's fastened to, hoping for the pop I've been promised. Nothing. I try again, my breath beginning to bubble out of my nose with the effort of swimming in place, fighting the currents that are pulling me to and fro. Still nothing. This abalone, evidently sensing my presence, has locked down tight. Once that happens, I'm finding, it is nearly impossible to remove. Diving for abalone is an attractive but dangerous sport. In pursuit of the elusive mollusk, I've submerged myself in the waters of Salt Point State Park, along the solitary switchback Sonoma coast 2.5 hours north of San Francisco. The hazards are many: cold water, rip currents, rocks, kelp tangles, heavy surf, sharks. Still, most every season, April through November, thousands of hopeful swimmers make their way to the Northern California coast to try their hand at abalone hunting. The wild red abalone is the biggest in the world and is found only on the west coast of North America. It's where I can play the role of prehistoric hunter, swimming down for my dinner, with zero experience. I hold a scuba certification, but over the years all that gear has come to feel claustrophobic and encumbering when I'm in the water. Here on this part of the coast, scuba tanks are illegal, so abalone divers are armed with few tools beyond their breath-holding and swimming skills. The reality of this back-to-basics man versus nature pursuit is that every cove along this part of the coast, rangers say, is a gravesite. In 2015, 4 people died while abalone diving during the first 3 weeks of the season alone. It turns out that even experienced divers can't hold their breath for long. People who are used to wearing full tanks of air start to panic when confronted with this fact. In the murky water, it's tough to stay oriented. The swell will toss you against the rocks and then suck you out to sea. But still, I want to try. I learned to spot the abalone's rippling lip of black tissue, or mantle, against the side of a big, craggy escarpment. I struggle to dislodge one, then another. An ancient pea-sized part of my brain lights up with satisfaction when I jackknife down to the seafloor, eyes on the prize, and finally hoist a 6-pound abalone out of the water. I need both hands to haul it up and both legs to propel me. I can feel the grin forming on my lips before my head even breaks the surface. I've never felt the urge to shoot a bird for breakfast or run down a deer for dinner. But the direct appeal of swimming for my lunch is clear from the moment I spy the shellfish. There's something I need to understand about the act of swimming for something more essential than exercise. In my backyard later that day, I clean, trim, and pound the meat tender. Yep, with a rock. Cook it up over a flame, and feed my family of 4 a meal I've prepared entirely with my own hands and breath and body. We are divorced from our food sources. It is a recognized symptom of modern life. Swimming for resources allows me, for a moment, to resolve that disconnect. That evening, when I rinsed my hands in the sink and watched the water drain away, I remember the rhythmic sluicing of seawater through the rocks along the shoreline and what it felt like to watch it all flow back toward the horizon. The first known record of swimming lies in the middle of a desert. Somewhere in Egypt, near the Libyan border, in the Sahara's remote and mountainous Gilf Kebir Plateau, there are swimmers breaststroking up the walls of a cave. The Cave of Swimmers, discovered by the Hungarian explorer Laszlo Amsi in 1933, contains a trove of Neolithic paintings that depict people in a range of underwater poses. Archaeologists have dated the creation of the artwork as far back as 10,000 years ago. At the time of Amsi's discovery, the notion that the Sahara had not always been a desert was a radical idea. Theories of a climate change that could account for the shift from temperate environs to barren, hyper-arid desert were so new that the editor of Amsi's 1934 book, The Unknown Sahara, reportedly felt compelled to insert footnotes stating disagreement. But the paintings convinced Amsi himself that water might have been a natural feature in the immediate vicinity of the cave, that the swimmers themselves were the painters, that a lake lapped their very toes as they worked. Where there is now a sea of sand, there was water flowing. Where one medium is liquid life, the other may seem to be its parched, granular antithesis, he thought, but the two were indeed connected. It turns out, of course, that Amsi was right. Decades later, archaeologists would find dried lake beds not far from the cave, from a time when the Sahara was green. His answer to the riddle of swimmers in the desert would eventually be confirmed with a remarkable abundance of geological evidence showing a landscape once dotted with ancient lakes, as well as the startling discovery of hippo bones and the remains of many other water-dwelling animals, including giant tortoises, fish, and clams. This wet period became known as the Green Sahara. Not long ago, in an old issue of National Geographic, I read about a paleontologist named Paul Sereno, who further confirmed Amsi's hunch. In the fall of 2000, Sereno was hunting for dinosaur bones in a different part of the Sahara, the southern edge, in conflict-prone, little-explored Niger. In the open desert, some 125 miles from the country's largest city, Agadez, one of his expedition photographers scrambled up a remote group of dunes and stumbled across a massive trove of skeletons. This time, the bones weren't from dinosaurs or hippos. These eroding, windswept sand dunes revealed what turned out to be hundreds of human remains, interspersed with prehistoric fragments of pottery that were up to 10,000 years old. Some of the pottery pieces were carved with wavy lines. Others were stippled with dots. The burial place, which the scientists called Gobro, the Tuareg tribal name for the area, was the largest and earliest Stone Age cemetery found to date. It turns out the Green Sahara was exactly the sort of place where prehistoric human swimmers might exist.
Thank you. That was so lovely. I was so taken by this idea of the Green Sahara when I was reading this book, because I knew about the Cave of Swimmers. And one of the things that interested me in your book in the first place is the idea of this kind of slightly missing cultural history of swimming that we don't really get. We often get it in fragments, or it's kind of just linked to a history of sports swimming or something. And I loved how you kind of took off from there, and then this whole world of this Green Sahara opened up for me that I had no idea about, and was really fascinating, but also really moving as well to imagine that this was a very rich and fertile place with all these lakes, and you very beautifully describe through talking to this paleontologist the lives of the people that might have lived there as well, the lives and the deaths of them.
Right.
And it's gone, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, right. So we can so easily imagine, much more so our ancestors running through the desert or running down prey, because we've been acculturated to that. We've been taught that history. We've learned it in school. But what I'm so glad you brought this idea of filling in the picture, the sort of missing some of the missing pieces that connect us to that past, because I really did want to do that. I really wanted to establish, get our imaginations going. Of course, one of the things I say in the book is, one of the unfortunate realities of human swimming and kind of trying to track that history is that we don't, we leave a wake, but then the wake disappears, right?
Yeah,
So there's not a ton of evidence from water, because it just we don't have that. And so absent the more concrete, like the paintings or things that are still remain in the land and haven't been washed away, that the pieces of artifacts that are found on this at this particular site that we talk about here in the book, I just found that so fascinating. I wanted to talk to someone who could kind of lay out that landscape, that seascape, or that lakescape for us, in a way that we had not heard or imagined before.
It also, that episode in the book brought out one of my favourite phrases in the book as well, which I think was saying that the paleontologist didn't swim a lot himself, but he'd thought a lot about both dinosaurs and people swimming. Which I love that yes, well, yes, I suppose you would, wouldn't you?
It's related. There's a connection.
Yeah. But I love that idea of looking at the ancientness of swimming and how that also connects to how and why we swim now. So the kind of fundamental idea of the book of why we swim. And I love the way that you kind of think about all these different layers at once. So it kind of struck me that there's several books in one, in some ways, in this book. There's a kind of memoir of a history of your own relationship with swimming, both through your own life, with your children, and with your parents as well, and their history of swimming is kind of enfolded into it. And then there's a kind of stream of biographies of quite extreme swimmers, which we might get to later, some quite fascinating people. But then there is this cultural history of swimming, both as leisure and as sport, but as survival as well, which ties into this idea of evolutionary biology and people who are maybe more able to swim than others for various different reasons. And at one point in the book, you're talking to someone who says that anybody can swim, anyone and anybody. But it struck me actually that there's a lot of different bodies in this book, and there's a lot of mutant bodies as well, people who are maybe on right. the extreme edges of what's normative for a human as well, which I found really fascinating. And I wondered how you got to all these different bits of these kind of strands of the book, and whether that kind of just happened organically through the things you were interested in, or whether one led to another as you went through.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Bonnie Tsui. If you want to watch the full hour-long interview, you can check it out over on the Kendal Mountain Player, where we have over 400 different films and collections to choose from, as well as adding brand new content every single week. Also, if you sign up now, you'll actually get to be the first to see all our festival content when it goes live in November as well. So make sure to check that out and everything else, all in the links in the description below.